We might have scheduled this a bit too late.
They're all having tea.
This is all recorded now, so please try not to talk. And we've got 9 attendees, so okay, we're gonna start now. Thanks.
Right, good evening. I think we'll make a start. Welcome to you all to the Festival of Research. The Festival of Research is something that's being run this week. In fact, some of you have probably been to other sessions as well. So welcome to this, the Wednesday evening session. And this year, the Aberystwyth University Festival of Research is concentrating on the subject of climate change. So you can think of it a bit as Aberystwyth University's own little COP26, although we got there before Glasgow did. So this evening's session is going to last about 45 minutes. I'm going to introduce you to the other people, my fellow presenters. My name is Tony Orme, and I'm the careers consultant at the university with the responsibility for enterprise, entrepreneurship and startup, which will become apparent in a moment what the relevance is. I'm also joined on the call this evening by Professor Mike Christie, and we're going to ask Mike to update us all on the particular courses and schemes that are run by the business school that have a relevance to both business but also to climate change. And I'm very pleased also that we're joined by Rhiannon, Rees and Alex Newnes from PlantSea. PlantSea is a business that was set up fairly recently, very much in conjunction with the university and related to the university, and in fact were the winners of the 2020 Inventor Prize competition, which I'll be saying more about in a few moments. So we'll be hearing from Rhiannon and Alex, who'll be making a presentation, and you've got the opportunity then to ask questions, to put your questions into the chat function, and for me then to ask your questions of Rhiannon and Alex towards the end. We hope to finish by 6:15, so we'll keep everything nice and tight. Anyway, the first thing that we're going to cover is what the university, and particularly the business school, is offering to students and perhaps postgraduates as well, in terms of courses and modules that are related to both business, but in particular to climate change. So I'd like to hand over now to Professor Mike Christie from the business school. Thank you.
Good. Hello, everyone. I'll just share my screen.
It's fine, Mike. Your slides are up. You can just talk.
Okay. So I'm Mike Christie. I'm a professor of environmental and ecological economics at Aberystwyth University. And we're really excited at the university to have developed a whole bunch of schemes related to climate change. So if you want to click, Sonia. So what we've kind of done in university is we've looked across the university and can realize that there's a whole bunch of expertise on climate change. And what we wanted to do is kind of pool on that expertise to develop a suite of study schemes. And so we're trying to pull across disciplines to make these study schemes interdisciplinary. So we're looking from different disciplinary perspectives on how we can respond to climate change. So I think what's important about these schemes, it's less so about understanding the science of climate change, although that is important, but the schemes are very much focused on how different disciplines can respond to the climate crisis. And so we've developed this suite of schemes. There's the economics of climate change and business and climate change. So there are two schemes in the business school, and I'll talk a little bit more about them. There's biology and climate change, international relation, and English studies and climate change. So what are the schemes? There's a core of climate change schemes where we look at the science of climate change, and we look at climate change from all these different perspectives. And then we take an angle from one of the disciplines. So you get a degree in economics with a focus on climate change. Okay, so next one. So next slide, okay. So why are these schemes distinctive? So I think what we try to do when we develop these schemes is to look at climate change from kind of largely the social science perspective, also a science perspective, make them interdisciplinary. And what we're trying to do is look at how these different disciplines can contribute to the discussion, the debate, and the solutions to climate change. So we can look at from a whole bunch of different perspectives, and that way it'll hopefully give us an idea how we can solve the problem. So just understanding the science of climate change doesn't necessarily solve the problem. We need to look at how we can get policies to improve climate change, how businesses can change to deal with climate change. So that's with different perspectives. Okay, next slide. And next one. So I'll look at two schemes. First of all, the economics of climate change. So as an economist, I'm very aware of how different policies can help businesses and consumers respond to climate change. So what we'll be doing is combining a knowledge of the science of climate change with a whole bunch of economic tools to try and support the transition to a carbon neutral economy. So if you're studying this course, you'll be studying economics, you'll study microeconomics, macroeconomics, you'll study econometrics, but you'll also discover a whole bunch of climate change, and you'll study things like environmental economics. So we'll look at how different policies can create incentives for businesses or consumers to reduce their emissions. So things like the European Carbon Trading Scheme or taxes on carbon, etc. So it's getting an understand of how governments at the local, national and international scale can deal with climate change. And clearly what's going to be happening in Glasgow next week, we'll be looking at these policies. So it's kind of trying to get students to come up to the level of knowledge to be able to design and implement these policies. So next slide. So the second scheme in Aberystwyth is business and climate change. So governments themselves can't tackle climate change. It needs businesses to also think about how they can reduce their carbon emissions. So businesses are not only the key contributor to climate change and greenhouse gas emissions, but they're also part of the solution. So what this scheme again combines the science of climate change with a whole bunch of business management skills of how you can successfully create a sustainable business. So looking at business leadership, looking at marketing and all those different elements of being a manager of business. And it's very much trying to get businesses to realize that being carbon neutral and environmentally friendly can actually improve your profit. So it's not climate or profit, it's a win-win situation if you deal with it properly. So that's what we're trying to create, a bunch of future business leaders who can develop meaningful corporate social responsibility strategies to address climate change and other climate issues. So both these modules, you have a core of economics or business, you've got a core of climate, and we're trying to combine it together. Okay, final slide. So not only is Aberystwyth University got a great reputation in climate science, but the university itself is trying to be sustainable. So it's just a couple things. So by 2030, the university is hoping to be carbon neutral. So we're going to try and make sure that we don't emit more carbon, not the greenhouse gases, compared to what we do. We had a carbon management plan between 2014 and 21, and we managed to reduce 40% of our emissions. So we've still got a long way to go, but we almost reduced about half of our emissions. The university's investing about £3 million in a package of energy efficient measures across the whole of the university estate. So that's going to help reduce carbon emissions. We're also just about to receive planning permission to develop a £2.5 million solar PV array on the university farms, and that will generate about 25% of the electricity needs. And we reckon that that will pay itself back within 8 years or so. So given that investment on solar power will be cost effective as well. We've also invested in sustainable transport. We've bought a number of electric cars, and there's a whole bunch of electric charging points with the university to try and encourage staff to have more electric cars. And finally, we're also the first university to receive plastic-free certification. So I think what we're trying to do at Aberystwyth is sell ourselves as a university who really cares about the environment, not only in terms of the research and this whole suite of research about the science and the social science of climate change, not only in terms of what we do in university about trying to be carbon neutral, but also develop the next generation of students who can help get that transformation to a carbon neutral world, whether it's through economics, whether it's through business, or whether it's through international relationships or biology. We hopefully get all these different problems and students from these different schemes working together to get solutions for this grand challenge of climate change. So lots of exciting things happening here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. Thank you very much, Mike. That was really interesting to hear, and very refreshing to hear that departments of the university are working together so closely. I mean, it's always been a criticism of universities generally, that courses aren't specifically driven by what industry and what the world needs, but these courses clearly are designed to address the needs that we are all becoming increasingly aware are needed to be addressed. And so, you know, I think I commend these courses to anybody looking at them. And also, it's good to see that the university is not only offering courses, but is actually underlying that by living or operating in a carbon-free way as possible. And thanks for outlining those things as well. Right. So what's the connection between what Mike's been saying and climate change and our speakers this evening, our presenters from PlantSea? Well, I suppose the link really is through the university's enterprise initiative, Aberpreneurs. The university's career service runs something called Aberpreneurs, which is for students, graduates and staff with ideas for businesses and social enterprises. We run regular enterprise events where we bring in specialist speakers, how they've set up and run businesses, looking at specific issues of setting up and running a business, like producing a business plan, cash flow forecast, intellectual property issues, selling, marketing, etc., to help people with ideas and to add in the business skills that are needed, a bit like Mike's been talking about really, to help the scientists and the artists and the people with the business ideas to turn those ideas into viable businesses or social enterprises. As well as the events that we run quite regularly, we also offer, through our partners at Big Ideas Wales, we offer one-to-one mentoring, free one-to-one mentoring from our small team of Big Ideas Wales mentors, and that's all channeled through Aberpreneurs. And we also, every year for the last 8 years, have run something called Inventor Prize. Now, I'm quite proud of this. This is our flagship initiative at the university. And this is where the alumni, the graduates of the university, every year for the past 8 years have put their hands in their pockets collectively and have put £10,000 cash on the table each year, which is beginning to mount up to quite a lot of money. Every year this is run as a competition, and this because of the size of the prize, not only the prize of the £10,000 first prize, but also a prize for the best biotech business, which is very relevant to what we're talking about, which is a year and a unit in the Aberystwyth Innovation and Enterprise Centre. We have another prize for the best maths, computer science or physics business, and we're adding other prizes as we go along. Well, 2020 was an interesting year from many points of view, you know, there are the negative sides of 2020, like COVID, but I would say one of the gleaming lights of 2020 in terms of enterprise entrepreneurship and startup in the university was the fact that the winners of Inventor Prize were such an interesting, innovative, exciting company and exciting project, which is PlantSea. So I'd like to invite the winners, Rhiannon and Alex, to make a presentation about PlantSea, after which we'll take any questions you might have based on the presentation. So it's over to you guys.
Thank you so much, Tony, for that introduction. We've got some slides we'd like to go through, so just to give you a little bit of an introduction on the company, and then we're obviously going to welcome any questions that people want to put in the live chat. So if we can have the first slide, please. So this is us at our new location in Spark in Anglesey. We've just opened our first new laboratory space that's just our own. It's a really vibrant business hub with offices and lab space in North Wales. And around there you can see some of the awards and support that we've had over the last 18 months. We've been really fortunate to have support both locally in Aberystwyth and nationally, and I'll talk about some of those competitions later. So we've got Gianmarco and Alex and myself in the photo. We are a multidisciplinary group. We've got very different backgrounds. My academic background's in marketing and tourism with experience in running small businesses. Alex, co-founder, his academic work, amongst other things, is phytoremediation and looking at low carbon biosolutions for the treatment of industrial waste, and he's also an environmental consultant. Gianmarco, his background is also in environmental science and phycology, which is the study of seaweed. His doctorate was investigating sustainable food production in indoor horticulture. We've also been working with many collaborators and supporters. Their help has been invaluable, particularly Rhiannon Hayward at Aber Innovation, Jeff Bartlett, who facilitates the Bioaccelerator, Chris Probert at Smart Cymru, and the team at Vic Innovation. Our academic partners at the Biocomposite Centre in Bangor University, and the many commercial partners we have. Okay, so this is where we started. This is probably our first team photo in the summer of 2020, when we were able to meet up after months of lockdown. And you know, we had a really interesting time over that lockdown, the first lockdown. It was quite a nice distraction to be working on this business idea. Gianmarco actually got the group together pre-COVID back in December 2019, and we sort of knew each other well enough to start talking about potential business. We talked about lots of different ideas. The environment was very much on our minds, and we decided quite early on that we wanted to work on something that would help the planet. Next slide. So how our idea was born: plastics are everywhere, and you know, it's a massive problem. You know, we've all seen Blue Planet, we know about these issues, and there's often an expectation and pressure on consumers to make better choices, and there are some things we can do, like reusing, refilling certain items, but you know, what about everything else that just comes wrapped in plastic? And you know, a small turning point for me was at a plastic-free day at Aberystwyth University, where they ban all plastic sales for a whole day. And I've been in the library that day, and you know, going to the art centre to buy my typical lunch, and you know, everything was, you know, chocolate, crisps, all the convenience stuff was like banned for the day. And I just thought, you know, why? Doesn't it come in something else? And I was pretty annoyed because I couldn't get any chocolate, obviously. And I started collecting a bit of research into plastics and, all the different systems that are out there, like refills and like closed loop systems. And, it was something that we were kind of talking about as a group. And, Gianmarco and Alex started to experiment with, our first prototypes from Seaweed. And, being in Aberystwyth, it seemed like a really good source. I mean, if, go on YouTube, you can find loads of videos of people making bioplastics, whether it's from potatoes or, fruit peelings. And, we did a lot of work around trying to find like a really good biomass source, because we wanted something that was going to be sustainable. And also looking at materials that actually properly biodegrade, because there's a big difference between what's compostable at an industrial level to what will actually compost in a food recycling bin, or something will actually compost if it's just left in the ground or ends up in the sea. And we're very conscious of that, and it's something that's kind of driven a lot of our research. So next slide, please. Just a little bit on plastic pollution. We know that they're causing huge environmental and food safety concerns. 8 million tonnes of plastic makes its way into the oceans and can degrade into microplastics, threatening marine life. The production of plastic and those refining process contributes to climate change because of the CO2 emissions. Next slide. So, why seaweed? Well, it's a natural plant. It's found widely across coastlines across the world, and it's particularly abundant and easily cultivated, here in the UK. It's a key part of it is its ability to absorb and sequester carbon. So seaweed farms and aquacultures can sequester, well, they're estimated to currently sequester 2.48 million tonnes of carbon a year. And it's renewable, and it just has huge potential, not just in bioplastics, but in many other industries. Next slide. So our projects, we've been producing a range of films and flexible materials with a range of applications. That's Gianmarco and Alex in the early stage kitchen lab there. Next slide. So we're looking at, you can actually click again for various applications, including agriculture, supermarket products and cosmetics and shampoos. So we can't really demonstrate any of our prototypes because we're patenting them, so it's a bit frustrating at the moment. We'd love to show you our films and our various prototypes, but hopefully by next year we'll be able to do that. We picked these 3 areas because there's real gaps in the market here. There's many applications that we could potentially go into, and we're always getting asked by people, can you make all sorts of things like biodegradable tents to, had somebody emailing me today about, various things that they want to put in the compostable materials. We're trying to focus on these 3 areas, and we've, these are the areas that we've had funding for. I wanted to just show a slide about technology readiness levels because we're moving through these like one by one, and what we didn't really understand at the beginning of this journey was how complex and how difficult it is to go from an idea where you need to carry out a lot of research and actually commercialize it at scale. So we're kind of at this kind of level of 4 at the moment, where we've validated our technology in the lab and we're starting to try and validate it in the environment, and we're going to be gradually moving through to levels 9 and 10 where it's actually commercially available and people will be able to buy it. It'll have all the right certification and testing, and it will be completely safe. So just got a couple of slides now on the journey so far. All started with the Inventor Prize, which we applied for just before the first lockdown, and we presented in, I think it was in the April, online. It was like the first time for me anyway, to kind of do an online presentation. And that was a really exciting time, because it was all about the idea. We had loads of great feedback. We'd managed to make some very early stage prototypes that kind of looked like a green cling film. that, you know, was like, looking back now, it was really kind of, you know, early stage, but it was a really exciting time, and we had some great feedback from the judges and loads of great advice of how to move forward. And you know, they've encouraged us to kind of look for more funding, and we held on to that £10,000 for months. We didn't spend any of it because we wanted to use it to match fund. And on the next slide, you'll see that, you know, the next bit of our journey was going through the accelerator at our innovation, and that was like a much tougher part for us, because you know, we were really kind of getting much more difficult questions of, well, how are you going to manufacture this? How are you going to scale it? Where are you going to get your seaweed from? You can't just collect it from the beach anymore. You're going to have your supply chain sorted. You're going to have, you know, your financials, your cash flow, you know, spot on. And you know, that was a really good experience for us, having the mentorship, being local, and there was, you know, we knew that we had a really good, well, didn't know we had a good chance to win it. We just really needed to win it because we needed to put that money into our research. So we were very motivated to try to do the best that we could and use all that support. And a lot of that time was spent, you know, just trying to find manufacturers and obviously getting a lot of no's and getting a lot of silence, because we were a group of students that won a competition. But you know, we did obviously get there in the end with a bit of perseverance. So then, where we're at now, well, the most recent months, we've won further awards and funding. We've, like I said earlier, opened our new lab, and we're looking forward now to January, where we'll be moving through those next technology readiness levels and employing our first employees that we're going to bring into PlantSea in laboratory roles, as well as like admin and management roles. So I think that's the last slide. I hope we've, yes, it is. I hope we've covered in kind of our journey and given you a flavour of what we're up to, and we welcome your questions and you know, anything you want to know from us. Thank you.
Well, thank you very, very much. I can't see any questions at the moment, but I've jotted a few down. Obviously, the most important one first is, how important was access to chocolate to driving climate change?
Yeah, quite important.
It sounds as if it was one of those.
I think, yeah, but also, I mean, Alex would have his personal reasons for why. You know, why did you kind of commit to it? Do you think, Alex?
So I've got an environmental background, first of all. I think Rhiannon mentioned that. So I've always been sort of passionate about environmental issues, and things like plastic pollution and climate change have obviously been quite significant ones for quite some time, despite them only really gaining momentum in recent years. So it was an opportunity to really do something that I believed in, that was ethical and could, what we believe, could really make a difference.
And I think team sounds as if it was very important, you know, right from the beginning. You know, many people come up with ideas, and some of them very good ideas and very ambitious ideas, but quite often from a point of view of scientists with ideas or artists with ideas. But you brought together business and science, which sounds as if it's a good combination. Would you recommend that to other people who've got business ideas?
I mean, yeah, it's really hard, you know, it's really, really hard to kind of keep going, because, you know, we have, you know, been able to get the funding that we needed, but there were, you know, lots of times where we just thought, oh, you know, is it really worth it? Are we, you know, maybe better off finding a job or finding something else to do, because, you know, it has been hard going. But I would say that, you know, if people have got a good idea, there is help out there, and it is just a matter of accessing it. I think we're very lucky in Wales and in Aberystwyth to be able to access the support. But yeah, I would definitely tell people to go for it, and especially if it's something you're passionate about, because that's what's kept us going through the times when things were difficult and we didn't seem to be getting anywhere. You know, the weeks and months where it was the same problem that we were all talking about, and it was the same issue, and you start to think, oh, we're never going to do this, but because we all cared about it so much, I think that's why we kept going.
Just maybe a controversial point, I don't know, but generally listening to, you know, Radio 4 and various things that they've been doing recently on climate change and ideas for many different sorts of climate change ideas. And what comes to mind is, you were talking about IP and protecting ideas. There must be other companies in Britain, in the world, doing a similar thing to you. Do you collaborate or do you compete?
Well, you know, we are actually trying to collaborate. We're trying to start a seaweed cluster with the help of BIC Innovation, because we believe that we can rise together, particularly with seaweed being quite a very small industry in the UK. Like if you look at Asia and Japan, it's huge. You know, the seaweed industry is absolutely huge. So we'd like to collaborate with other people working with seaweed so that we can all help each other. And to be honest, there's not many people in the UK working. It was actually very difficult to find academics in a laboratory where we could, you know, kind of partner with, because it's still very much at experimental level. What would you say, Alex?
Sorry, I lost a bit of connection then.
All right, yeah, because you're much more involved in the whole seaweed, you know, stuff. Tony was just asking about, should we be collaborating or competing with other people that are working with seaweed?
Okay. Essentially, we're all facing the same technical challenges with this material. What we are struggling with, the sort of properties that we are trying to achieve with our materials, are exactly the same sort of issues that these other companies are having. And there's actually very few functional products available that meet all of the needs of the supply chain, that meet all the needs of consumers. So on one hand, you know, why not work together? Because we put all of our heads together, we can surely overcome all of these challenges. But it is the nature of business, isn't it, for it to be a competitive environment, and everyone plays their cards very close to their chest, as you can probably imagine. So we are forced to do the same thing, although, yeah, we are looking for opportunity to collaborate where we can, where it is appropriate, and not a compromise to our business.
Thank you for answering that question. As I said, it was slightly, well, it must be one that all companies who are, you know, even if they're doing something that's going to save the planet, they need to be able to make enough money to make that business successful, to employ the people, to have the, you know, to do everything they need to do. So,
and especially as we now are looking for investment, you know, we're going to pitching events. Our business plan now is pretty complete. And yeah, we were quite fearful in the early days of really talking about what we were doing, because we thought someone bigger and better would copy us, you know, like a pharmaceutical or chemical company, or a big packaging company. But actually, since in the last few months, where we have actually made some inroads with big packaging companies, they've actually said to us, you know, we don't have the bandwidth to do what you're doing, but we are able to scale. So we're working with one of the second biggest packaging companies in the world. They specialise in cardboard, and they're really excited to work with us because, you know, they don't have the know-how, but, you know, we're thrilled to work with them because they've got this enormous capacity to scale and to help us commercialise. So, you know, we've been really fortunate the last few months to find some opportunities to collaborate.
Thank you very much. I have a question in the chat, and it's related to one I'd written down as well. And I suppose this is all going back to watching films like Finding Nemo, where the fish swim around in the seaweed and the seaweed is their environment. And the question is, how are you going to cultivate the seaweed without impacting on existing marine communities? And I'd written down, if you harvest seaweed, do you replace it? How long does it take to replenish? So there we are.
Okay, so I can take this one, like. We're sourcing our seaweed from sustainably grown seaweed here in the UK. So what we're not doing is collecting anything from the beach. You know, there are rules in place for collecting seaweed from the drift. You're not supposed to harvest a certain percentage of it, but ultimately that wouldn't yield enough for what we're ultimately trying to do. And the seaweed sector is actually quite significant. There are millions and millions of tons of seaweed that are commercially grown, commercially farmed all around the world. And even here in the UK, there's tens of thousands of seaweed that is pulled out of the sea every year. Because it's used for a number of things, many dietary products, many supplements. It's used for medical applications, and biomaterials and bioplastics just makes up a very small percentage of the uses for seaweed. So a lot of these places exist, and in terms of other environmental impacts, so there used to be lots of machine harvesting and things like that, but a lot of it now is, there are a lot of rules again in place to limit the environmental impacts of these seaweed farms. There's a lot of hand harvesting going on, a lot more sustainable and non-disruptive methods. And the only real criticisms towards this aquaculture, this farming of seaweed, is the fact that it can disrupt the movement of water and cause ecological disturbance that way. But seaweed itself, you know, as Rhiannon's touched on, it sequesters massive amounts of CO2, and it serves as a breeding grounds for many fish and marine wildlife, so actually can increase the abundance and diversity of marine wildlife around these farms. And so it's generally considered to be a sustainable practice, in summary.
Thank you very much. I think you've explained that very thoroughly to the layman, which I must admit I am, although there might be people on the call who are a lot more scientifically based than I am. In fact, there is another question. There are other starch-based plastics out there now, e.g. covering on magazine supplements, etc. What makes the PlantSea product different and better?
So I can touch on this and then Alex can probably follow it, but you know, basically the starch-based ones are made from PLA or PBAT, which is a crop, you know, comes from crop growth, which is kind of not great when you think about how land should be used, because ideally we need to be using all our land to grow food, not put it into packaging. And the other thing about it is that it has to be industrially composted. So in the UK, there's another problem with recycling in the UK, to be honest, is that every council has got different collection systems, and some of it goes to anaerobic digestion, some goes to these industrial sites, and some types of plastics are actually very difficult to, you know, some types of bio-based ones have to go to industrial, and they often don't end up there, they end up in landfill, and some of these will create microplastics if they go to landfill. So what we're trying to do is something that will go to food and won't create microplastics no matter where it ends up. But I mean, I don't really want to add anything to that, Alex.
Yeah, just very quickly, what you've covered are the main points there. But another thing that we're trying to do a bit differently is watch the carbon footprint. So there's a lot of really mixed scientific literature out there about what is more sustainable, these PLA and starch-based plastics or conventional plastics. And a lot of analyses are now kind of suggesting that because they're all derived from agriculture, they're not derived from waste products like some people would lead you to believe. They have to be, it's cropped specifically for the production of a biomaterial. And because of all those agricultural inputs, the farming, the nutrients, things like that, the carbon footprint can actually sometimes exceed that of plastics. And one of the things that we're particularly focused on is ensuring that our carbon footprint is as low as it can actually be, and that's by integrating innovation into our production processes and our business practices at this really early stage, so we can, you know, meet these needs to have for low carbon products, essentially moving forward.
Thank you. We have another question from somebody called Vianney from Brazil. I think it's Vianney from Brazil, unless the person has a double-barreled name, which is Vianney Brazil. Anyway, whether that person's calling us from Aberystwyth or from Brazil, the question is, what's more difficult for us to start a small business? Is it getting the funding, or is it putting the ideas into practice and translating them into actions to make a difference in the world? I guess my answer would probably be you need a bit of both, because you need the money to enable you to get the ideas into practice. But what's your take on that?
I mean, I think it's both. I think it's both. What's really helped us is having, you know, being a team, being three of us, because we haven't had to do it all, you know, on our own sort of thing. We've been able to kind of divide and conquer. So while I focused a lot on the business aspects and grant applications and competitions, obviously Alex and Jamarco contribute to that, but they've been able to work on the technology and kind of make inroads with other business connections as well. So one probably is, but you can't do anything without the money. So, you know, if nobody's willing to fund you, then, you know, if we hadn't won those prizes, we probably wouldn't have moved forward, because, you know, we weren't in a position to put the level of money needed into it.
Thank you. I saw a photograph of you in your presentation standing outside the new Innovation Centre, very distanced, very correctly distanced, and that centre is now open. I went there last week and had a tour around it, and it's full of lots of stainless steel equipment and things, a lot of which I'd imagine would be useful for you guys. Have you used it, or are you going to use it? Or
yeah, so we did rent lab space there. We were renting it sort of on an ad hoc basis to do some work, and you know, it is an amazing facility. They've actually got their grand opening, I think, tomorrow, and you know, we've kind of seen it grow over the last year with all the additional services. And even though we've got what we weren't able to do in Aberystwyth was find a suitable lab space just for us. It was only available to rent ad hoc, and I know that Rhiannon is looking at that issue, you know, trying to find somewhere for companies to grow so they can stay in Aberystwyth potentially. And because our partners are up in Bangor, you know, our academic partners, because the Biocomposite Centre, and the Biocomposite Centre is like a world-renowned centre for the development of materials, and particularly biomaterials. So I'm sure, you know, even though we're going to be up in MSPAC, we'll still be collaborating with Aber Innovation, you know, where we can. And I know that they've offered to do quite a bit of testing for us and various things. So yeah.
Lovely. Thanks. I think we're on schedule for the finish in a couple of minutes, but I do have another question here. It runs as follows. You won lots of awards, which looks very impressive, and it did look impressive. You had all the logos and everything. How much effort did it take to apply? When did you find the information about what your advice what advice would you give to young entrepreneurs on how to access these sorts of funding? And I suppose something that always makes me concerned is whether a business changes what it does to fit in with what the award or the grant or the competition is asking for and moves away from what they actually want to do. I mean, what's the relationship? And I suppose in the early days, you know, £10,000 is probably quite significant, but is there a danger of that actually changing what you do and the pace you're doing it because of the prize?
So I think there's two aspects there to the question. The first part was, you know, about how much time did it take, and the honest answer is a lot of time. And I can honestly say, you know, we should nickname it the second PhD sometimes, PlantSea, because there was so much paperwork to fill out. And you know, we're lucky that we're all quite academic, and we can sit and write. But I know there is help available as well, like with Big Ideas Wales, you can get quite a lot of help for writing grant applications. But it is heavy going, and we would send it out to all our friends and family to read over and check, and you know, try and rope people in. I think people got fed up with us after a while. Like, can you read this for us? And then the other part is changing what you're doing to meet a grant. You know, to be honest, the criteria for a lot of these grants is really quite stringent, and you have to really prove what you're doing fits the grant criteria. There are some open calls, like Innovate UK do an open call, they call it the Smart Grant, which anyone can apply for, but that one is so competitive that you've literally got like a 2% chance of getting the money. We've just been very lucky that, you know, while we were developing this idea, there were competitions around sustainable plastics that we were able to apply for. So, you know, but it's a case of spending time on the internet, Googling and looking for competitions, and also looking for competitions where you can learn something as well. So like the Bio Accelerator, even if we hadn't won that, we still would have learned an awful lot, you know? So I think it's not really about just chasing the funding, you know?
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Can I jump in real quickly on that as well?
Thanks, Alex.
Sorry, Tony. Just to add a little bit to that. Yeah, so the big grants that we applied for, the $250,000, the $750,000, they are enormous tasks. But for anyone that's looking at the Inventor Prize and things like that, there are other awards that Innovate UK run that are a little bit less specific and a bit more open and require a lot less work. So one of the awards that we got early on was the Young Innovators Award, which is something I was awarded by Innovate UK. And that's another sort of program that is trying to cultivate young people to run a business. And in a similar vein to the Bio Accelerator, it provided a number of skills and number of contacts and a number of networks and things like that. But in contrast to the other applications, was a lot less effort in terms of applying, and gives you a lot more flexibility in terms of what you can do. So that's definitely something for people to look at if they're also looking at your competition as well.
Yeah, I would say, so I'll probably regret saying this, but if there is anyone out there who's trying to apply for money, do get in touch with us, and if we can help you, with some tips or with some ideas, then please get in touch, because we've had a lot of help. We haven't done it by ourselves, so if we can help anyone else, then we'd be more than happy to.
Well, on that very generous offer, obviously there's a 10% backhander for it, but on that very generous offer, I'd like to thank both Rhiannon and Alex very much for their time this evening in explaining to everybody about PlantSea, where the idea came from, what you're doing now, how you're looking to grow the business, and all the sort of questions that other people whose businesses may or may not be as world changing as yours, with the same principles involved. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. Also, thank you very much to Professor Mike Christie for talking us through some very interesting future opportunities for students at the university and summarising what the university is doing in terms of addressing climate change itself. And also, they wouldn't want me to thank them, but thank you very much to Sonia and to Jonathan, who behind the scenes have made sure all the right buttons have been pushed, and so everybody's been able to ask questions and that sort of thing. Anyway, we've just about hit the time correctly, so thank you very much on behalf of all of us, and I hope you've all got out of this session what you hope to get out of, and all the very best in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.